You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
The UK-Japan Cyber Partnership, which looks to identify particular areas upon which the two countries can cooperate, both to include that area within the remit of their bilateral relations, but also to improve the mutual capabilities they each hold in this space.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caveat, N2K Cyberwire's privacy, surveillance, law, and policy podcast. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is my co-host Ben Yellen from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security. Hey there, Ben.
Hello, Dave.
On today's show, Ben takes a deep dive into the particulars of a cell phone search warrant and seizure. I look at a lawsuit challenging online surveillance. And later in the show, my conversation with Joseph Jarnecki from RUSI. We're talking about their work on the UK-Japan Cyber Partnership. While this show covers legal topics and Ben is a lawyer, the views expressed do not constitute legal advice. For official legal advice on any of the topics we cover, please contact your attorney. Imagine this. Your primary identity provider goes down, whether it's a cloud outage, network issue, or even a cyber attack. Suddenly, your business grinds to a halt. But what if it didn't have to? Meet Identity Continuity from Strata, the game-changing solution that keeps your business running smoothly no matter what. Whether your cloud IDP crashes or your on-prem system faces a hiccup, Identity Continuity seamlessly shifts authentication to a secondary or even tertiary IDP, automatically and without disruption. Powered by the Mavericks Identity Orchestration Platform, Identity Continuity uses smart health checks to monitor your IDP's availability and instantly activates failover strategies tailored to your needs. When the coast is clear, it's a seamless switch back. No more downtime, no lost revenue, no frustrated customers. Just continuous, secure access to your critical applications every single time. Protect your business from the high costs of IDP outages. With Identity Continuity from Strata, downtime is a thing of the past. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to learn how Strata's Identity Continuity can provide seamless enhanced capabilities to your existing identity fabric and receive a free set of AirPods Pro. All right, Ben, let's jump into our stories here. You want to start things off for us?
Sure. So I had a friend send me this one. It's from Vital City, which is a online news magazine for New York City. And this concerns the recent indictment of New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And in this piece, the author of the article interviews a former federal prosecutor by the name of Carrie Cohen. It's a fantastic interview. We'll post it in the show notes. But she goes through the particulars of what happens when the government obtains a warrant to search a cell phone, what that actually looks like in practice, how they resolve some procedural questions, and just some other really interesting elements I hadn't really thought about. It's kind of like a phone search and seizure for dummies.
Okay.
Which is why it was perfect for me.
I was going to say that. Sign me up.
Yeah. Including things like if they take your phone, do they have to compensate you because you have to go get a new one? To which the answer is no, because this was done pursuant to a proper law enforcement warrant. So,
well, that's like when law enforcement executes a search warrant in your house and they trash the place.
Right, they bust it down.
But even they dump drawers out all over. Like they have no obligation to clean up after themselves.
No, they don't. It's basically like if you let a rabid dog into your house, and you just have to kind of accept the consequences.
Right.
But that's true here. So the origin story for this is that last November, the FBI stopped Mayor Adams on a public street in New York City. They asked his security detail to step aside, and they seized 2 of the mayor's phones and an iPad. When the phone was handed over to law enforcement was told that he had just changed the password, but that he had, quote, forgotten the password he had just set, and thus was unable to provide the FBI with a password that would unlock the phone. Okay.
Okay. As you do.
Yeah. So I just kind of want to get into some of the interesting particulars of this interview. The first question is why we've seen so many seizures of phones and other devices. I thought this was a really important question, along with why do you need to take physical possession of the phone? You could always go to just an internet service provider to obtain things like emails. But if the primary mode of communications is text messages, you really need to obtain the warrant to get that physical device. Sometimes they're stored in the cloud, but for end-to-end encrypted applications, you just have to get on that device. And so it's worth it to do what they did here, which is get a warrant for the physical search of that phone. The other question is, like, did they have to make such a big scene out of this? Like, why did they have to corner him in public? Did they try and talk to him first and try and obtain his consent? One of the answers here, it seems obvious, but I just think it's worth thinking through, is if anybody has advance notice that their phone is going to be seized or that law enforcement is even considering seizing the phone, that person has the incentive to delete stuff, messages, applications. So I think the best way to do it is to be very surreptitious about it. Try and find the mayor when he's out in public. They want to be in a situation where he's not able to make a scene and start screaming at the FBI agents who are trying to seize his device. That wouldn't be very becoming of a mayor on the streets of New York City. And they basically, one of the things she said, because she was asked in this interview, is this a last resort? And she says it's kind of a later resort. If that warrant is executed in public, you no longer have a covert investigation. And that can end up undermining the particulars of that investigation. Because once that phone is seized, Eric Adams knows he's under investigation. He's going to try and conceal his other communications.
Oh, I see.
So that was another really interesting element of it. Then the question of who gets to see this stuff. Because if a search warrant is executed, is it something that becomes publicly available? Does the defendant, the potential criminal defendant, have an opportunity to see what the government has obtained on the device? The answer is generally no, including the law enforcement officials who obtain the device. The warrant has to allege with particularity that there's criminal evidence for criminal prosecution on a particular application, which is another really interesting element here. So it's like we're trying to collect his WhatsApp messages. It can't be just take the phone and figure out what's in there, see if any on his grocery list application if there's anything incriminating. So even law enforcement officials have to hew very closely to that warrant requirement and only search the things that they have been authorized to search. The criminal defendant is handed a copy of the warrant itself. So the warrant will describe what the allegations are, the probable cause that some evidence of criminal activity exists, and particularly what they're going to be searching. But the only way the public would ever have access to it is if this became evidence at trial. Then that question I was getting to, like, does the person ever get the phone back? The answer is no. The government has to run diagnostics on it. You generally don't sit and search the phone on the phone. They're uploading it onto a computer. But basically, they keep it because it's evidence in a criminal investigation, and that means the person has to actually go out and buy a new phone.
Mm-hmm. Which will then seize.
Right.
Maybe it's just time to be phone free for a while.
Yeah, I mean, if you're engaged in as much political corruption as is alleged for the mayor of New York City, then maybe just use a burner phone for a while.
Carrier pigeon.
There are also questions, and we've touched on this in this podcast, about does he have to reveal his passcode, and would he have to allow his face to be used as Face ID to open the device? In New York, a warrant is actually required. This is not true in every state, to use biometrics to open a device. So they would have needed to obtain a warrant to get his face to open the phone. In terms of the passcode, because of his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, he is not obligated to provide his passcode. Basically, he cannot be forced. This is the contents of his own mind. You can do one of those brute force attacks to try and unlock the phone using some of the cooler methods that we've read about, but there's no ability to force him, which leads to the natural question, what happens at trial when the prosecution tries to introduce evidence? Like, look at this guy. He just gets a new phone. He said he just sets it up, and then he claims that he doesn't remember his passcode.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, can that be used in evidence at trial? And that depends. If you are trying to keep that from being used as evidence at a trial, have that communication come from your attorney, because that is given proper privilege for testimonial evidence. Don't try and give law enforcement extemporaneous evidence when your phone is seized. And then she asked about the difference between the type of search that's happening here and wiretapping. So kind of the traditional Title III of the Omnibus Crime Bill in 1968 or whatever governs when the government can wiretap you, so listen in on your conversations. And there are differences. One of the big ones is that you can only wiretap for certain enumerated crimes that are listed in those statutes. It is much harder, just for practical reasons, to obtain evidence from a wiretap. You have to have a government official who's sitting there listening 24/7. And so that can be rather labor-intensive. And then agents are not allowed to listen to privileged conversations. So if somebody's talking to their attorney or they're talking to their spouse or with anybody else for whom there's some legal privilege, they are not allowed to use that evidence at trial. So that's why a phone is a good alternative, especially if you suspect that the person is communicating, as we all do, via text message. Per the Supreme Court in Riley versus California, you do need a warrant to search somebody's cell phone. But before I read this article, I guess I didn't have a proper conception of how they dot the I's and cross the T's here. And that's why I thought this was really interesting.
It is. And so a couple questions come to mind here when we compare the search of a mobile device to something like the search of a home. It seems to me, when we're talking about having to get permission to search individual apps, two things come to mind. First of all, I suspect law enforcement is just going to give the judge a laundry list of every possible app.
Yeah, but that's generally not acceptable. I mean, judges are going to be skeptical of something like that because that sounds like a general warrant. I think you do really have to allege with some particularity. Like, we're curious about his text messages, and based on the investigation so far, we believe he's using WhatsApp. Like, that's the kind of particularity they're going to have to allege.
So my question is, if someone gets a warrant to search someone's home, is there any of that sort of particularity? Are they saying, we want to search the bathroom vanity and we want to search the safe in the basement?
No, but you do have to have particularity in what you're searching for.
Okay.
Which I think does end up restricting the scope of a search. So it's like, we're going into this person's house to search for documents, forged documents or whatever. Then you're not going to be permitted to, uproot their bathroom and dig into their floors. You have to allege with some particularity. The government will not allow you just to obtain the judicial system will not allow you to just obtain a general warrant to go into somebody's house and see what you can find. You have to specify exactly what you're looking for and where you expect to find it.
Okay. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, it seems to me that the mobile device is such a special category. It's a new category.
Right.
Still
very new.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like, I wonder where eventually, over time, are we going to land? Will this be, we talk about the castle doctrine for our homes. Will there be a castle doctrine for our mobile devices where it gets a special category of its own because of the breadth of all of our personal comings and goings and everything that are contained on it?
Well, I wouldn't analogize it necessarily to the castle doctrine because that's about
that's defense.
Yeah, it's protecting your own property. What I would say is it already does get, in some sense, special dispensation. If you are arrested and incident to that arrest, the government searches your pocket and finds a notepad, and that notepad contains written evidence of your criminal activity, that's eligible to be seized and can be used against a person at trial, which is not the case for a smartphone because of Riley versus California. When the court recognized that these are basically our body parts, it has extremely sensitive personal information. So even if law enforcement obtains a cell phone incident to arrest, it's not like any other thing that you can seize during an arrest. It's special. That's what the court has said in Riley versus California, and I think that's well reflected here.
Interesting. No, this is an interesting article, and it's funny how, these, I guess, high-profile cases give people an opportunity to unpack these sorts of things. So,
yeah, and if you are a public official engaged in corruption, again,
or just interested in your civil rights as a citizen.
In your security, yeah. But I would say try not to communicate on these devices, especially if you expect that the government is, or that law enforcement is going to get some evidence of criminal activity. You're going to be screwed. So burners, guys, burners.
Burners, right. Flip phones, burners, yeah.
Carrier pigeons.
Right. Yeah, see? There you go. Carrier pigeons, they don't talk.
They're foolproof, yeah. You cannot coerce anything. Now, parrots, they might, squeal on you, but
that would be problematic.
I actually think there was some case, I don't remember exactly what it was, and I'm too lazy to go find it, where like a parrot did confess to something. They repeated something that a criminal defendant said.
No, there are a bunch of old Far Side cartoons that hinge on a
Shut
talking
up, parrot, stop.
Yeah. Stop or I'll shoot. Stop or I'll shoot. That sort of thing. All right, we will have a link to this story in the show notes. My story this week, this always happens, Ben, where you and I record our show and then like an hour later, someone drops a really interesting article that I would love to talk about on the show. And
it's incredible, the pattern of this happening. Like, it's usually 5 minutes after we leave our recording.
Right, just count on it. So that happened to us last week. There was coverage on a number of different news organizations were given simultaneous access to the goings-on of this lawsuit. And I'm going to be using information from Krebs on Security, which is written by Brian Krebs, a very well-respected cybersecurity tech journalist.
Yeah, a legend in this field.
There you go. And this is about a lawsuit that was filed in New Jersey by an organization called Atlas Data Privacy Group. And they are suing 151 data brokers on behalf of New Jersey law enforcement officers. It turns out that there is a law in New Jersey called Daniel's Law, which was passed in 2020 after the murder of a judge's son, whose name was Daniel. And this law was passed to protect public access to sensitive data of public servants. So law enforcement officers, judges, I suppose it probably extends to, I don't know, maybe election officials, people who are serving the public good. This is designed to protect their personal information from being gathered up to prevent them from, being in harm's way. So what this lawsuit spotlights is this technology from a company called Babel Street, and they have a platform called LocateX.
Could they have picked a more obvious name that sounds suspicious?
3 guesses what LocateX does.
Yeah.
So
I probably would have chosen something different, but
so
go on.
LocateX uses mobile advertising IDs, which are called MAIDs. Mobile advertising IDs spells the word MAIDs. Clever.
Sexiest maids out there.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And they they gather your information from your device. They use information from ad exchanges to track mobile devices, their location. So this organization who's doing the lawsuit, Atlas Data Privacy, they hired a private investigator who used a free trial from Babel Street to locate police officers' movements and addresses by setting geofences around what they call high-risk sites, places like mosques, like clinics, government buildings. And basically what this software does is you can draw a ring around a building, let's say where you work, Ben, and this will track the comings and goings of all the mobile devices that have these mobile advertising IDs, which pretty much everybody,
Right.
right? And it'll track their comings and goings. And as you and I have talked about, it is pretty routine. If I put a circle around where I know you work and I put a circle around where I know you live, it doesn't take me very long to figure out which of these beacons is you.
Yep.
And then I can track that beacon wherever you go.
To the mosque, to the abortion clinic,
Right.
to the other sensitive places that the government might be interested in knowing about.
Right. So the folks at Babel Street who make this platform, they're saying that they only contract with government entities. But this investigator from Atlas, he got granted access just by saying that he was thinking about doing some work with a government entity, evidently.
Man, what a rigorous background check they put this guy through.
Well, yeah, that's what the story says. So the concerns are obvious here, right? We've got privacy advocates who are saying that these sorts of platforms enable abuse, targeting individuals at sensitive locations, and there's really no accountability here yet. So, of course, the usual suspects in Congress, like Senator Ron Wyden, they're saying that this sort of thing shouldn't be possible, and the companies who enable these ad tracking technologies, like Google and to a lesser extent Apple, need to do a better job in restricting this tracking. Apple, to their credit, has made some of this harder in that, well, I guess the right way to say it is they've made it easier for their users to opt out of this sort of thing.
You know what I'm reminded of here is this is one of your great theories that maybe the only way we can effectuate change in Congress is if this technology is employed against members of Congress.
That's right.
So you figure out where they live, you know where they work at the Capitol. You figure out which beacon, which device is theirs, and then you track it.
Yeah.
And if that member of Congress happens to go to a brothel or any other type of incriminating institution,
right,
then you basically can blackmail them and get them into supporting legislation. What was the historical example you always use? It was it video store records?
Yeah, it was video rental records. I want to say back in the 80s, there was, and so it used to be legal for a video store to just give out that information, and some enterprising reporter did that. I think it was Judge Bjork, who they got the records for. And so, that changed but quick when Congress realized they were vulnerable to this. Yeah, I mean, I think you get someone like John Oliver, a rabble-rouser, someone who has this a comedy approach to investigative journalism, maybe somebody from the Daily Show, or just, somebody like your New York Times or your Washington Posts who have the budget to do something like this. Let's make it bipartisan. Track some leading senators and Congress people on either side of the aisle for a month, and then just publish the results and say, we are not sure that this is Senator Wyden or Senator Cruz or Nancy Pelosi or whoever, but we know that this is someone who lives here or someone who sleeps here and works here, and according to public records, that's this person. And see how quickly, well, I mean, let me ask you, how do you think they'd react?
Well, even if individual members felt threatened and blackmailed, it's a collective institution. So there'd have to be enough of a groundswell to actually effectuate change here. I feel like we've been encouraging John Oliver to do something like this for years.
We have, yes, I have.
Yeah, and he would be the perfect person to do it because, his show is both informative and very humorous.
Right.
And then you can really trap these lawmakers. Get them in a situation where something is so fundamentally embarrassing that they're motivated into enacting a policy change. Because right now we're really just begging these companies not to collect data in this manner. It's good that Apple has taken the lead on this. So far, Google has not. And as you said, they are the foremost purveyor of this sort of ad tracking.
Yeah,
so
Google's got the biggest ad network.
Exactly.
So.
We've talked about this in the context of antitrust cases. So if you're not getting Google, you're not getting a significant portion of the industry.
So let me ask you this. If someone did this to Congress, can you think of any tools that Congress has at its disposal to come after the folks for doing this, to exact retribution rather than react with their heads hanging in shame?
Well, I mean, you could deploy the technology against John Oliver or whomever does.
I'm saying, though, is there any legal recourse? Could they go after someone for any type of invasion of privacy? Or is the point here that they gave away their privacy, like all of us?
I mean, I guess we'll have to see what happens with this New Jersey lawsuit. And this is a lawsuit based on a New Jersey state statute about public officials. So maybe in New Jersey, if you're a public official in New Jersey, depending on how this lawsuit goes, you might have a private right of action here.
Yeah.
As a general matter, no. I mean, if the collection of this information is legal, if it's deployed against public officials and there's not that carve-out that we have in New Jersey, then they're out of luck. They can be surveilled just like the rest of us can be surveilled.
Do you think they could carve it out just for themselves? You know, the way they do with like insider trading and stuff? Like only
it doesn't count for members of Congress. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, this New Jersey law kind of does that.
Right.
Because you're preventing public access to sensitive data only of public servants. Like there are a lot of pretty prominent people who are not public servants.
Right.
Maybe they are major business executives or community leaders. Their information's still eligible to be collected, and they wouldn't have any standing to sue. So this is kind of its own sort of carve-out. I mean, it would look bad for Congress to do, but as you've said, they have done things like that in the past.
Right, right. Since we're in the post-shame era of politics here in the good old U.S. of A., who knows what they'll do? So. All right, we'll have a link to this story in the show notes. It is a good one. I'd say I'm linking to the coverage from Krebs on Security. There were a handful of other organizations who covered this, notably the folks over at 404 Media, who always do a great job. So do check it out. If you're listening to this show, I can guarantee this is a story you're going to want to check out. So we'll have a link there in the show notes. And now, a word from our sponsor, NordPass. NordPass is an advanced password manager from the team behind NordVPN, designed to help keep your business safe from data leaks and cyber threats. It gives your IT professionals control over who has access to your company's data and makes it easy for everyone else on your team to use strong passwords. Right now, you can go to www.nordpass.com/cyberwire for 35% off the NordPass Business Yearly Plan. Don't miss out on that. All right, Ben, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Joseph Jarnecki. He is from RUSI, which is the Royal United Services Institute over in the UK. They're an independent think tank. They engage in research on defense, security, and international affairs. And they recently released a report that caught my eye. It was about a partnership between the UK and Japan when it comes to all things cyber. And what particularly piqued my interest is you don't really think of Japan very much when it comes to cyber. They're an ally, but you don't hear a lot of news coming out of Japan when it comes to cyber. So I was interested to see what's in it with this UK-Japan partnership. Here's my conversation with Joseph Jarnecki.
So the UK and Japan have had long-term bilateral relations. Recently, there has been an effort on both sides to renew and inject renewed vigor into those relations. We've seen that with the introduction of the Hiroshima Accord in 2023. This was across topics including defense, trade, investment, science and technology. But particularly what's fallen out of that is the UK-Japan cyber partnership, which looks to identify particular areas upon which the two countries can cooperate, both to include that area within the remit of their bilateral relations, but also to improve the mutual capabilities they each hold in this space.
So the paper that you all have published mentions cybersecurity as both a distinct activity and an enabler for further cooperation. Can you expand on that and how that helps shape this partnership?
So this is a really interesting thing with the UK-Japan case, and it goes to the heart of a headline project that both participate in. So both the UK and Japan, as well as Italy, are members of something called the GCAP, so the Global Combat Air Program. This is an initiative, a trilateral initiative, in order to create a sixth-generation aircraft. For the purposes of creating that sixth-generation aircraft, obviously there's a considerable amount of joint work that goes into it. There's also a considerable amount of information that's exchanged between the partners. So a headline activity for the UK and Japan is fundamentally depending upon the cybersecurity trust and expertise of the members of the partnership as well. So that's how it's an enabler. In terms of how it's an activity, we see throughout the report various examples of different activities the UK and Japan are conducting on cybersecurity, whether that's with regards to capability development, UK and Japanese companies engaging with their respective governments or their partner governments on the development of capability in terms of public-private partnerships, Japanese companies participating in UK PPPs, for example, the Industry 100 scheme, or in terms of advancing shared international interests, which is the final kind of priority within the UK-Japan cyber partnership.
One of the recommendations is expanding capability development through personnel exchanges and training. How important is this particular component? What are some of the benefits here?
So Japan has committed a quite considerable amount of resources over the next few years to expand its pool of cyber professionals, particularly within JMOD, so the Japan Ministry of Defense. They're currently sitting at around 800 to 900 personnel that are cyber experts, and they're looking to build that up to around 5,000 within the coming years. A critical dependency for those personnel to be able to work effectively with partners is being exposed to those partners. We see that in the close relationship that the UK has already with its existing partners, whether that's the US or European like-minded countries. The reliance, I think, is on, more often than not, familiar exchanges between individuals. So we need people to actually have experience of working together in order to work together effectively. It's the same thing, exactly the same thing in Japan.
It's interesting to me because we talk about, here in the US, when we're talking about diversity, one of the things that comes up is that when you have diverse viewpoints, that often leads to better solutions. And I think about the inherent diversity between the cultural history and mindset of folks in the UK versus those in Japan. It seems to me as though there's a big opportunity here to exchange ideas and information.
It's a really interesting point in terms of diversity. I think that what's been normal throughout the relationship so far is that diversity, those discrepancies in terms of intelligence culture, in terms of national security culture, have been presented as challenges. I think reframing it as a diversity of viewpoints is a really valuable perspective. First, in terms of the literal diversity of understanding and information that the two sides can access. If we think about Japan's understanding and knowledge of adversary capabilities and adversary cultural approaches beyond their TTP.
Joe, we were talking about public-private partnerships here and the role that plays. And could you share with us, what are some of the specific sectors that you think could benefit most from these sorts of collaborations?
So it's a really interesting thing with the UK-Japan cyber cooperation because, at least in our experience from the wider research we've done, it's not often a core theme with formal bilateral partnerships, including such a focus on public-private partnerships. So in Japan, there are various initiatives to support public-private partnerships, including the Cyber Defense Council, which is convening members of the defense sector, the Japan Cybercrime Control Center, which convenes various organizations that touch on cybercrime, including commercial banks. And in the UK, similarly, there are initiatives, including the Industry 100, which loops in various different organizations. And so what's distinct in the context of the bilateral relationship is that there are firms in the counterpart country which have joined the national, let's say, public-private partnership. So in this case, Fujitsu and Nihon Cyber Defense, both companies with Japanese origins and sizable presences in Japan, also have UK branches which are members of Industry 100, a UK public-private partnership scheme. So that the benefits there are first kind of building familiarity between the two industry ecosystems, kind of promoting sharing of best practices, ensuring that people have the best product offerings available to them in terms of cybersecurity across multiple sectors, but then also ensuring that there's a growing familiarity and an increasing cultural closeness between the two countries, which obviously have quite a significant geographical distance between them and a maybe more significant language barrier.
Well, I mean, that brings me to the next question, which is, what are some of the key challenges or obstacles that this partnership faces? And you mentioned there is a language barrier. Beyond that, what are some of the things that could trip these folks up along the way?
So the kind of two classic challenges that present to most bilateral partnerships, as I'm sure your listeners and yourself are well aware, is kind of are we speaking the same language? So literally in this case, Japanese and English are different languages, and both the UK and Japan don't really have sterling reputations for learning languages. And then similarly, are we speaking the same language in terms of our approach to intelligence, security, information sharing? There are quite significant differences in terms of how Japan and the UK deal with things like clearances, classifications, information security. So understanding and building mutual understanding in terms of that kind of language, building mutual understanding in terms of that kind of language also presents a challenge. Secondly, then, the other kind of classic challenge is resourcing appropriate measures to build cooperation amidst scarcity. So neither the UK nor Japan prioritize this over everything else. Naturally, there are various domestic and other international factors that they're prioritizing. So it's a question of how do we appropriately resource the level of ambition that we have in the context of this partnership, as well as making it multiply the efforts we put in different contexts. So what I mean by that is, how does this kind of initiative, for example, tie in with AUKUS? How does that tie into, for example, efforts that Japan is doing separately from the UK with the Quad? How does this tie into partnerships potentially that both Japan and the UK have with regards to thinking about Asia-Pacific security more broadly, promoting, as late Prime Minister Abe put forward, the free and open Indo-Pacific model, which the UK is also subscribed to?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to consider to what degree each of the nations sets this partnership as a priority, given all of the other things going on in the world, how to make sure that it gets the attention it needs without being wasteful or in fact, the paper talks about avoiding wasteful or unnecessary activities.
Yes, I think this is a key finding we had in the context of high-level commitment to the relationship. So on both sides, we can quite clearly see that there is high-level commitment, and there has been consistent high-level commitment to the partnership, to the cooperation, particularly on cybersecurity over the past 10 years. This has been interesting in the sense that it's been driven from the top down. There are many operational engagements now, and those continue to grow, but largely the momentum has been pushed from the top down. So one thing we identified that was critical to make sure that this partnership doesn't just run its course or run out of steam is to make sure that activities which don't necessarily bring a lot of value just don't happen. So sometimes there's, and I think we talk about this in the paper as well, sometimes there's a desire on part of policymakers to find a key cyber area or a particular kind of hot word of the day and work on that. So in this case, there was a degree of focus on cybercrime that both countries obviously, there's a degree of focus on cybercrime from both countries, which is completely appropriate and commensurate with the national threats they both face. But if you think about the overlaps on cybercrime at the commodity level between Japan and the UK, those aren't necessarily massive. And so overly formalizing that relationship when the limited interactions that do happen effectively and quickly is wasteful. So I think looping back to your core point there, it's really important that despite the strong high-level momentum, which can unlock significant resources and can ensure that activities do happen, we don't just do things for their own sake.
Is there some symbolism here for the rest of the global community to witness this partnership, to witness its success?
I think that the symbol that I would take away from this partnership is the commitment that Japan is showing to information security and cybersecurity, which I believe will be an unlocker for some of the other defense and security relationships that other countries, particularly the US and other Five Eyes allies, are looking to have with Japan. So we think about it in the context of that, in that global context, this is a key takeaway, I think.
Ben, what do you think?
If you tell somebody 80 years ago that the UK and Japan are going to have a defense partnership, I'm sure they would be shocked at that development. No, it's encouraging. I think we need to have these bilateral and multilateral relationships, just considering the threat landscape. And we should note that our adversaries are forming these relationships. I mean, we got the report this week that there are North Korean soldiers fighting in the Russia-Ukraine conflict on the Russian side. So if they're going to team up, then the allies in the free world also have to team up on everything. And cyber is certainly the most acute threat. At least it's the one that we care about the most. So
yeah,
yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think we often talk about how having a diversity of experiences and opinions in even like small groups leads to better outcomes. And I think that applies here as well. When you have a national mindset, a different culture, a different way of thinking of things and approaching things that the Japanese bring to the table versus the way the UK brings things. Certainly there are bumps in the road along the way, but ultimately, hopefully, you end up with better outcomes just by having that diversity of thought brought to the table.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, again, our thanks to Joseph Jarnecki for joining us. He is from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI. We do appreciate him taking the time. Around every entry point and every clever attacker, Vectra sees the attacks others can't. How? Vectra has AI on it. Vectra's AI attack signal intelligence tells security teams where to focus, what matters. It wades through thousands of individual threat events so you don't have to. Attackers infiltrating your network? Vectra has AI on it. Attackers compromising your identities? Vectra has AI on it. Vectra AI, the integrated signal powering your XDR. Visit vectra.ai/showme to learn more. That's vectra.ai/showme to learn more. And that is Caveat, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to caveat@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector. From the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode is produced by Liz Stokes. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. The show is mixed by Trey Hester. Our executive editor is Brandon Karpf. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Ben Yellen.
Thanks for listening.